A Sanctuary of Wyrms by Peter Fehervari, found in the Dark Coil Damnation, published by Black Library. Begin recording. We walk blindly along a knife edge slicing into oblivion. If we misstep, we fall from our path. If we walk through, we fall with our path. Perhaps there is a difference, but I have come to doubt it. Nevertheless, I will honor the greater good and allow you to draw your own conclusions from the facts. I have little time, but even in extremis one must observe the correct protocols. That is what it means to be a Tau among savages. Whatever else I have lost to this diseased planet, I will not lose that. Therefore, know that I am Porui Viorla Asharil, third-stream daughter of Clan Kerai. Though I hail from a sept of worlds where the wisdom of the water caste is eclipsed by the ferocity of the fire caste, my family has served the Tau Empire with grace since the dawn of the first colonies. As I serve with this, my final account. And so I shall offer you a beginning. Let it be the grey-green mark that is the perennial staff of Fehervari, my new world. As I stepped from my shuttle, the planet seized me in a stinking, swirling embrace and would not let go. Blinking and choking in the smoke, I heard harsh voices and harsher laughter. Then someone thrust a filtrator mask over my face, and I could breathe again. "The first time is like drowning," my savior said. "It gets better." I don't recall who the speaker was, but he lied. Breathing this world never got any better.
"You have evidently made powerful enemies for one so young, Asharil,"
the ambassador said without preamble, peering down from the cushioned pulpit of his hovering throne room. His voice was soft yet vibrant. It filled the spacious audience chamber like liquid silk, the weapon of a master orator. His summons had followed directly upon my arrival, and I was mortified by my disheveled state. "I do not understand, Honored One," I blustered, stumbling between respect and revulsion for the ancient who presided over our forces on this remote planet. Oh, Seishin's authority was a testament to the excellence of our caste, but he reeked of years beyond the natural span of the Tau race. His flesh had aged to deep cobalt leather, barely concealing the harsh planes of his skull, but his eyes were bright.
"This is a terminal world," he continued, "a graveyard for broken warriors and forgotten relics like myself, not a proving ground for the hot blood of youth. Who did you offend to get yourself posted here, Asharil?"
He smiled, but his eyes belied it. "I walk the water path," I answered, seeking the natural poise of our caste. "My blood runs cool and silent, so that my voice may weave." Ocean's snort cut me short like a physical blow.
"I'm too old for wordplay, girl."
He leaned forward, and a strand of spittle escaped his lips.
"Why have you come to Fehervari? Who sent you?"
"Honored One," I stammered, struggling to avert my gaze from the lethargic descent of his drool. "Your pardon, but I requested this posting. I have made a study of the languages and customs of the humans." I deliberately used the Guela word for themselves. "And Fehervari offers most excellent opportunities to deepen my insight." He appraised me with distrust so candid it was almost conspiratorial, as if we were both willing players in a game of lies, a game that he was used to winning.
"So you wish to test yourself in the field, Asharil?"
He smiled again, and this time I saw humor there, though not humor I care to share.
"Then I shall not deny you. Indeed, I believe I have a most suitable commission for you.
I will never know why O'Shea Shin became my enemy in that one brief meeting, but he proved to be the least of the blights awaiting me on this world. Of the long conflict between the Tau Empire and the Guela Imperium for mastery of Fehervari I shall not speak. Mysteries shroud the world like whispering smoke, but I learned little of them before O'Shea Shin dispatched me to oblivion. Of the planet itself I could say much, for I travelled its wilderness for almost 5 months, but I will content myself with a single truth. Whatever you are told in your orientation, it will not prepare you for the reality of this place. To classify Fehervari as a jungle world or a water world is to grab a corpse in finery and call it beautiful. 80% of its surface is drowned in viscid, lethargic oceans that blend into the sky in a perpetual cycle of evaporation and drizzle, wreathing everything in a grey, green miasma that seeps into the flesh and spirit. The continents are ragged tangles of mega coral choked with vegetation that looks and smells like it has been drenched up from the depths. Stunted trees with fleshy trunks and bladder-like fronds vie with drooping tenements of fungi and titanic anemone clusters, everything strangling or straddling or simply growing upon everything else. Fecundity racing decay so fast you can almost see it. Whether Sector 031 is the worst of Fehervari's territories I cannot say, but it must surely rank amongst them. The Guela call it the Coil, a name infinitely more fitting than our own sober designation, for there is nothing remotely sober about that malign wilderness. A serpentine spiral of waterlogged jungles. It is the dark heartland of Fehervari's largest, most untamed continent. The war has left it almost untouched, but rumors haunt it like bad memories, of regiments swallowed whole before they could clash, of lost patrols still fighting older wars than ours, and of ancient things sleeping beneath the waters. Naturally, I dismissed such nonsense. My task was to cast a light of reason across this enigma, and unravel the coil, as O'Shea Shin so artfully sold it. I was to accompany Fehervari Mutek, a distinguished cartographer of the Earth Caste, on his quest to map the region. Fool that I was, I believed myself honored. It was only later, when I saw how the coil twisted it upon himself, that I realized the absurdity of our endeavor. I have often wondered whether O'Shea Shin is still laughing at me. It says much about the nature of the Earth Caste that Mutek approached his impossible assignment without rancor. A robust Tau in his autumn cycle, he had a pompous manner that exacerbated me, but he was utterly rigorous in his work. His assistant, Xanti, was a placid Autaku, or Datatech, who spoke rarely and never met my gaze. I believe he preferred the company of his neo-sentient data drone to his fellow Tau. The fourth and final person of note was our protector and guide, Shashui G. Kara, a fire warrior and veteran of Fehervari, who regarded the jungle with the tender distrust of a predator who knows it is also prey, and like many alpha predators, she commanded her own pack. A dozen Guela janissaries equipped with flak plate and pulse carabines. They were all imperial deserters, lured from the enemy by the promise of better rations rather than ideology. And despite the tropics of our civilization, they remained barbarians. Every night they gambled, quarreled, and brawled amongst themselves, but never in G. Kahara's presence. Had they known I spoke their native tongue, they would have guarded their words more closely, listening in on their crude passions and superstitions, I marveled that their stunted species had ever reached the stars. Together we entered the coil. Earth, water, fire, and mud, traveling its strange waterways in a pair of aging devilfish hover transports. Every few days Mutek would spot a notable feature and call a halt. Then we would spend an eternity recording some obscure geological phenomenon or ancient indigenous ruin. As the cartographer updated his maps and the janissaries patrolled, the jungle would press in, watching us with 1,000 hungry eyes that belonged to a single beast. "It hates us," Chikara once said, surprising me as I stared back at the beast. "But it welcomes us in the expectation that we will grow careless." "It is just a jungle, Sashui," I said, squaring up to the warrior. "It has no thoughts." "You are lying, Waterkin," Chikara said. "You see the truth, but like all your kind, you fear it." "My kind?" I was shocked. "We are the same kind. We are both Tau." Her face was hidden behind the impassive lens-studded mask of her combat helmet, but I sensed her sneer. As our expedition stretched from weeks into months, I came to detest every one of my companions, but Chikara most of all. Why, I recognized the place of the fire caste in the Tauva. There was a coiled violence about her that disturbed me. Perhaps it was her hideous facial scaring or her playful contempt, but no, I believe it was something deeper. Like O Seishin, she had become tainted by this world. Taint. Such an irrational term for a Tau to use. Surely one better suited to the imperial fanatics who condemn otherness for otherness' sake. Perhaps. But lately I have come to wonder whether the fanatics may have it right. It is time, I told you, of the sanctuary of Wyrms. "What is it?" I asked, trying to decipher the dark shape through its veil of vegetation. Squat yet vast, it rose from the center of the island ahead, evidently a structure of some kind, but unlike any other we had encountered in the coil. Despite the obscuring vegetation, its harsh, angular lineaments were unmistakable, suggesting an architectural brutality at odds with the flowing contours of our own aesthetics. Even at a distance, it filled me with foreboding. "The Niroda did not lie," Mutek said, lowering his scope. The Nirhoda, I recalled the feral, mud-caked indigenous we had encountered some weeks back. Technically, indigene was a misnomer, since the native Fraedrans were descended from Guela colonists who had conquered this world millennia ago, and then in turn been conquered by it. Squat and bow-legged, with huge glassy eyes and yawning mouths, they were primitive degenerates who wandered the wilderness in loose tribes. All were unpredictable, but the Nirhoda clan, who followed the chaotic arrhythmia of the coil, were notoriously belligerent. Yet Chikara had known their ways and won a parley for Mutek, who had traded trinkets for shreds of truth about their deceitful land. One such thread had led us here. "They certainly did not lie about the Wyrm trees," the fire warrior observed sourly. "That island is infested with them." I had taken the gentle undulation of the towering anemone-like growths encrusting the island to be the product of the wind. Yet there was no wind. I watched the swaying tendrils with fresh eyes. At the base, it was thicker than my waist. tapering to a sinuous violet tip that tilted towards us as if tasting us on the air. "Are they dangerous?" I asked. "Their sting is lethal," Jikara said fondly, "but they grow slowly. This must be over a century old." "That structure
evidently predates the war,"
Muthek interrupted with relish.
"We must evaluate this discovery thoroughly."
Something like avarice swept across his broad face, revealing another shade of taint, the hunger to know.
"You will clear a path, please, fire warrior."
Jikara turned the rotary cannons of our devilfish upon the forest, shredding the rubbery growths into streaming slabs that seemed more meat than vegetable. The trees shrieked as they died, their warble sounding insidiously sentient.
"It proved a poor sanctuary,"
Xanthi said with peculiar sadness. I glanced at Muth's assistant in surprise. He shrugged, embarrassed by my attention.
"That is what the savages called this place, the sanctuary of Wyrms."
Then the Janissaries went amongst the detritus with flamethrowers, laughing as they incinerated the flailing orphan tendrils. One brute grew careless, and a whip-like frond lashed his face as it flipped about in its death spasms. Moments later the man joined it in his own dance of death. It was the first time I saw violent death, but I was unmoved. Fehervari had already changed me. Unveiled, the building was almost profound in its ugliness. It was squat, octagonal block, assembled from prefabricated grey slabs that were as hard as rock. The walls tilted inwards to a flat roof that looked strong enough to withstand an aerial bombardment, suggesting the place might be a bunker of some kind. Circling it, we found no apertures or ornamentation save for a deeply recessed entrance wide enough to accommodate a tank. A metal bulkhead blocked the path, its corroded surface embossed with a stark eye symbol. Despite its simplicity, the sigil had an austere authority that deepened my unease.
"I am unfamiliar with this album,"
Muthek mused, running a hand over the erased metal.
"Your thoughts, poor Rui."
"It looks like a Guela rune," I answered. "Linguistically, it translates as the self, but in this context, it probably has a factional connotation."
"So the Guela built this place?"
Xanthi asked.
"Oh, I would most definitely postulate an imperial provenance," Muthek said, clearly enjoying himself. "Though it lacks the vainglorious ornamentation typical of their architecture, the configuration and construction materials are manifestly imperial."
"Why would there be Imperials on Fehervari before the war?" Xanthi seemed confused by the nation.
"Why wouldn't there be?" Muthem proclaimed. "Throughout the ages there have been Imperials almost everywhere. They are an ancient power that coveted the stars millennia before the Tauva was revealed to us. There is no telling when they first came to this world, or why."
"This place has the strength of a fortress, but not the logic," Jikara offered, speaking for the first time. "The walls are solid, but there are no emplacements or watchtowers. Perhaps they are hidden," I suggested.
"No, remember, this is pre-war Lyric," Muthem chided. "It was not constructed to keep an enemy out, but to keep a secret within."
"What kind of secret?" Xanthi asked loyally.
"The kind that was worth hiding well."
There was a glint in the cartographer's eyes at the prospect.
"The kind that is worth learning for the greater good." He slapped the bulkhead. "Open it!"
There was no obvious access mechanism, but Xanthi's data drone detected a biometric scanner embedded in the bulkhead.
"For the Guela, it is a sophisticated system,"
the Autaku murmured, his face lost in the dancing holograms projected by his drone. The small saucer-like machine hovered by the hatch, interfacing the mechanism with its data laser and mapping it into territory its master could negotiate.
I doubt I could receive this, Xanthi said, but it appears the seal has already been broken and crudely reset.
He looked up with a frown.
Someone has trespassed here before us.
Despite the damaged seal, night had fallen by the time Xanthi synthesized the correct trigger. Dead cogs ground into life, and the bulkhead rose groaning at the second desecration. A sour fungal fetor seeped from the dark maw, so dense it was almost visible. Some of the Janissaries chuckled as I retched and fumbled for my filtrator mask, but their faces were pale. Jikara silenced them with a sharp gesture, but I felt no gratitude. Her sealed helmet spared her the stench we suffered. Where was the equity in that? We entered the cavernous chamber beyond in a practiced formation, with Jikara's hovering Gandron taking point and the Janissaries fanning out to either side. A torch beam thrust back the darkness, but it clung to every corner and crevice like black cobwebs. The burned-out hulks of amphibious transports and machinery loomed on all sides, casting shadows across a graveyard of barrels and crates. The invaders closed off the escape route, Jikara said, gauging the devastation. They destroyed the vehicles and sealed the exit in case anyone slipped past them. Why did no one fight back? I wondered. There are no bodies here. A good question, Waterkin. Across the chamber, the inner hatch lay amongst the detritus, shredded and turned from its recess. Jikara knelt and ran her fingers over the wreckage. The edges were curled into serrated walls of tortured metal. Chain swords, she said. How can you be sure? I asked. The teeth leave a pattern. She paused and looked over her soldiers, staring right at me. Their mark is unique. It was almost a challenge. Unique? As if by their own volition, my eyes were drawn to the ghost of a scar running down the faceplate of her helmet, a wound that echoed the rift in her own face. And suddenly, I understood why she knew these weapons so intimately. The distraction petered out in the corridor beyond, but the sense of oppression did not. It shadowed us as we passed through one deserted chamber after another, closing in as we moved deeper into the outpost.
Smaller teams would cover more ground, Woodhead protested. Your caution is illogical, Shashui. This place is long dead.
But the fire warrior will not split our force, and I was struck anew by the differences between the castes. We worked together for the greater good, yet our natures were discordant. Woodhead and Xanthi were creatures of reason, while Jikara was pure instinct. What did that make me? I brooded over the question as we pressed on, passing through gun rooms and storerooms, the hallowed tomb of a dormitory and a mess hall where food still waited on the table, fossilized and forgotten. It took them unawares, Jikara murmured, and it took them swiftly. It? I asked. You mean the invaders? No. For the first time she sounded troubled. No, I think this was something else. We found the first corpse in the communications room, propped up against the Vox console. Shrouded in heavy crimson robes, the mummified cadaver looked more machine than man. Its face was an angular bronze mask studded with sensors, seemingly reverted to the skull. A pistol was clutched in a bionic claw, the barrel shoved through the broken grill of its mouth. Its cranium had ruptured into a crown of splintered bones and circuitry. He shot himself before the intruders reached him, Jikara judged. Or because they reached him too late, I offered uncertainly. She glanced at me, waiting as I tested the intuition. He's the only one we have found. Perhaps that makes him different.
He was certainly different, Xanthi said eagerly. Judging by his extensive bionics, he was a mechanicus priest, probably an important one. Unlike ourselves, the data techs of the Imperium aspire to become one with their machines.
The Autakus passion surprised me. Abruptly, I realized how little I knew about my companions. We had traveled so far together, yet we were still strangers. Was it our caste that divided us, or merely our personal flaws? Uneasily, I put the question aside and concentrated on the facts. Perhaps he summoned the invaders, I suggested. Chikara considered it. Perhaps he did, Waterkin. And perhaps I'm not the fool you took me for, I thought. The elevator to the lower levels had been demolished, and the hatch to the stairwell was welded shut from within. But that was no obstacle to our plasma cutters. Beyond, a metal staircase wound down into darkness. Chikara's gun drone led the way, levitating down the stairwell as we followed on the spiraling steps, its searchlight diving ahead into the abyss below. As we descended, the walls became brittle and powdery, sucked dry by silvery seams of fungus. In places the filth had erupted in cancerous, fruiting bodies, but they were all desiccated husks, seemingly petrified in the moment of blossoming. The stench was dreadful, and I kept my filtrator firmly in place. Mutet and Xanthi soon followed suit, but the Janissaries suffered stoically, unwilling to show weakness before Chikara. They're like dogs, trying to impress their master, I thought. At regular intervals we passed access hatches on other levels, and I realized the bulk of the outpost lay beneath the ground, like a buried mountain riddled with tunnels and caves. Some hatches were sealed, others gaped open, but we ignored them all. Exploring the entire complex would take days, and none of us cared to linger here. Instead, we pressed on, drawn by a collective sense that the answers we sought lay below. But then the drone's light finally found the bottom of the stairwell, and we froze.
Emperor, protect us!
One of the Janissaries gasped, but nobody reprimanded for his atavism. Our path terminated in a charnel pit. Dozens of cadavers were piled up below, mangled and contorted by violent death. The walls around them were pitted with deep craters, suggesting heavy gunfire, but it was impossible to tell whether it was bullets or chainsaws that had cleansed these dead. Cleansed. 'Tis another term that sits uneasily with the Tauva, yet it is the right term, for these creatures were unclean. Despite their wounds and decades of decay, it was obvious they were only superficially Guela. Their withered flesh was stretched out across misshapen bones, thickening to gnarled plates at the ribs and shoulder blades. Many had double-jointed legs and scythe-like appendages jutting from their wrists. Their faces were atrophied relics in elongated, almost bestial skulls, their jaws distended by hardened, stinger-tipped tongues. Some still wore shreds of clothing, but most were naked. They shed their clothes like redundant skins when the chains came over them. "We should go back," I said with utter conviction. For once I suspected the Janissaries were with me, but to my surprise they weren't the only ones. "Asharil is right," Chikara said. "This tomb is best left buried." Mutek hesitated. He was as repelled as the rest of us, but leaving a Mystrian soul was anathema to him. "Unacceptable," the cartographer declared. "It is our duty to assess, quantify, and record this anomaly. The greater good demands courage. Has yours failed, you fire warrior?" Chikara stiffened. The tension passed through the Janissaries in a sympathetic way, and I saw their weapons twitch reflexively towards the cartographer. Even Xanthi noticed it, looking back and forth between the opponents with a confused expression that was almost comical. Only Mutek seemed oblivious to his own peril. "I will continue alone," he pushed, "if you are afraid." I thought she would kill him then, I tried to intervene, to rise to my calling and smooth over the discord, but the words slipped away before I could marshal them. Instead, Chikara found a reserved discipline I had not credited her with. "Fire always walks at the fore," she said. Without another word, she stepped down among the corpses and sealed our. We followed the intruder's trail of devastation through a maze of laboratories and workshops that soon became unrecognizable. The fungal veins riddling the walls had grown ripe here, erupting into groping, ropey strands like calcified viscera. Before it froze, the stuff had entwined itself about everything, melting the rigid imperial architecture into soft organic shapes. We are crawling through a deceased corpse, I thought. But what if it's not dead, just forever dying? I fought to suppress the absurd notion, gasping for the clarity of the Tau Va, but in the cesspit it seemed a flickering false hope. The blighted dead were everywhere, snarled up in the weave where they had fallen, shredded, pulverized, or charred. They had died in droves as they swarmed against the incursion, and I found myself wondering at the lethality of their slayers. What kind of creature could carve a swath through such horrors? We found the answer in a ravaged infirmary, where the invaders had suffered their first casualty. The fallen warrior was almost buried beneath a mound of mutants, but there was no mistaking his statue. Alive, he would have been almost twice my height and countless times my weight. Could it really be? "Space Marines," Chikara said with something like reverence. "And where there is one, there will be others." My breath caught as she confirmed my suspicion. I had studied accounts and pictures of the Imperium's elite warriors, but they had seemed a distant, almost mythical peril. They were the stuff of nightmares, bioengineered giants bred to be utterly merciless in the service of the dead Emperor. It was rumored that 100 of these monsters could conquer a world. What were they doing here, I wondered, staring at the dead space marine in fascination. A helmet with a sharp, almost avian snout hid his features, but I could imagine the face beneath. It would be pugnacious and broad, with skin like toughened leather and a fretwork of scars and tattoos. A face not merely honed by war, but rebuilt for it. Chikara gestured to the Janissaries, and they heaved the mutants aside, exhuming the warrior's void-black power armor. Peculiarly, his left arm looked as if it were cast in silver, its shoulder pad carved into a stylized eye, sigil insert with a skull. More incongruous still was the bright yellow of the opposite pauldron. For all his ferocity, this warrior's grasp of aesthetics had been woeful. "I recognize this heraldry." Chikara tapped the angular fist inscribed on the yellow pad. "The Imperial fists are old foes of the Tau Empire. But this," she indicated the silver pad, "this I have not seen before. And the Imperial fists wear yellow armor, not black." "Wait," I said. "The second symbol. Isn't it like the one we found at the entrance?"
"It is similar," Mutek said, peering at the device. "But the insert skull is a significant deviation. There may be a connection, but careless assumptions are dangerous."
"Does it matter?" Xanthi asked. "The Guela fanatics are all insane. Nothing they do makes sense." "Know your enemy as you would know yourself," Chikara said, doubtless quoting some fire caste credo. "There is a mystery here." There was certainly no mystery about the Space Marine's death. His breastplate had been cracked open like a shell, and one of the mutants had virtually crawled inside his chest as it disemboweled him. The Imperium sent its finest warriors to purge this crisis, Chikara murmured thoughtfully. All the more reason for us to live, I insisted. No, we cannot. She stepped away from the dead giant. Space Marines do not leave their fallen behind. I don't see the relevance. Do you not? Think, Waterkin. The realization struck me like ice water. You believe they failed? Whatever happened here, she said, sweeping a hand over the mutated whore, we must be certain it is over. The trail ended at the uppermost tier of a subterranean amphitheater. Our torches struggled to make sense of the vast space, picking out details but unable to capture the whole, leaving me with the impression of a gargantuan hive woven from grey strands. Hunched in a depression at the center of the chamber was a pale mound. Thick cords of fungus sprouted from its base, multiplying and tapering as they spread out to insinuate themselves into every surface. As we descended, it became apparent the mutants had their last stand here, throwing themselves between the invaders and the heart of their hive. But one by one the space marines had also fallen. The first lay 2 tiers down, still gripping his chainsaw, though his head was missing. Like his comrade, he wore black and silver power armor, but his right pauldron was completely different. A white scar, said Chiara, pointing at the crimson flush on the white pad. They fought honorably on Dal-Eth. There were space marines on Dal-Eth? I was appalled by the idea of the Imperium penetrating so deep into Tau space. They almost took Dal-Eth, Waterkin. She chuckled dryly. Among your caste, some truths are left unspoken, lest they wither your faint hearts. Despite her words, there was no malice in her voice. We had achieved an understanding of sorts, she and I. Of more concern was the possibility that my own caste had lied to me. Was that really possible? Remembering the ancient manipulator Osei Shin, I found little comfort. As we continued our descent, Chikara paused beside each of the fallen space marines and examined his insignia solmeny, a blue raptor against white, a white balzo against black. She recognized neither of them, but she paid respects regardless, for each had died hideously and heroically, surrounded by suffered enemies. Why will they bear different cadre badges? I said, seeing how the riddle of their mismatched fraternity troubled her. Chaptah badges, she corrected. Space Marines call their factions Chaptahs. I frowned at her awkward pronunciation of the Guela word chapter. And to answer your question, Waterkin, I do not know. This confraternity contradicts everything I was taught about their kind. Space Marines adhere rigidly to their own clans. Perhaps they were forced to fight together, I suggested. Maybe it was a penitence for some transgression, or an honor. Neither theory was reassuring, especially since the dead mutants were growing more fearsome. Some bore no resemblance to the Guela at all, looking more like the spawn of an entirely different, utterly aberrant race. A few actually dwarfed the space marines, the bulk covered in spiny exoskeletal plates that looked strong enough to withstand a pulse round. All were molded with a fur of silver-grey mold, but it was impossible to tell whether the fungus had grown upon them or from within them. Audibly, Chikara stopped, gazing at one of the larger beasts. I know what they are, she said quietly.
They are mutants, Mutek declared. Evidently the product of some ill-conceived imperial doubling.
They are Yehe Mokushi, beasts of the silent hunger, Chikara said. The referent meant nothing to me, and the others looked equally mystified. She nodded, unsurprised. A predatory species the Tau Empire has only recently encountered. These differ from the bioforms depicted in our orientation sessions. By diversity is in their nature. They are living weapons that can still form as well as substance, becoming whatever suits their purpose.
And they are hostile to the Tau Empire?
Xanthi asked uneasily. They are hostile to all life save their own. Like locusts, they exist only to consume and multiply, leaving nothing but dust and shadow in their wake. It is said the Imperium has suffered greatly from their depredations. We were silent. Here was another ugly truth hidden in the name of the greater good. Over the last few months, my certainties had eroded away, revealing deception, obsession, and horror. What else had been kept from me? Down, further down, more dead space marines. First, a golden beast's head set against midnight blue, then another raptor, this one red against white. You respect these warriors, I said, watching Chikara carefully. I respect their strength, Asharil. But I sensed her admiration ran deeper. Chikara was an outsider amongst her own kind, closer to Fidrach's wilderness than the wisdom of the Taufa. She was drawn to these warriors for their brotherhood as much as their strength. By the time we reached the lowest tier, we had found 8 space marines. The last had succumbed at the periphery of his objective, his armor pierced in a dozen places by scything claws. Bizarrely, he was still standing, his body wedged on its feet by the mass of corpses pressed against it. Even amongst his brothers he was a giant, but there were other differences. While the rest had painted their left arms silver, both his arms were silver, or more like some stronger metal. Each was an angular augmentic, one terminated in a slab-like fist, the other in an intricate claw, whose purpose was probably manipulation rather than combat. His personal heraldry was black, it symboled a stylized white gauntlet. Iron Hand, Chikara declared. Another old enemy.
These would appear to be specimen containment units, Mutek said,
pointing out a pair of toppled glass cylinders that looked big enough to hold the largest abominations. Ropes of fungus were wrapped around them, squeezed so tight the reinforced glass had fractured. The fools brought the silent hunger to Fidrach, Chikara hissed. I was surprised by the fury in her voice. She sounded like her own world had been threatened.
So this place was some kind of prison?
Xanthi asked.
Not a prison,
Mutek said as he followed the web of pipes running from the cylinders to a corroded bank of consoles.
Remember the laboratories we passed through? No, this is a research facility. The Imperials were experimenting on these creatures. Perhaps they were seeking a means of communication.
The Imperium does not seek communication with its enemies, Chikara said. They were looking for a weapon.
But why here? Xanthi wondered.
It's just a coincidence. They came to Fidrach.
Many of the indigenous fungi are lethal, Mutek speculated. Perhaps they were attempting to synthesize a pathogen.
Then they failed, Chikara said flatly.
We do not know that, Mutek protested. The techniques of the Guela are riddled with superstition, but
the Yuhe Mokushi strain was too strong, I said, surprised by my own conviction. When the Imperials infected it, It devoured the fungus. Intuition, I realized. I'm neither entirely a creature of reason nor instinct, but something subtler than either. It became the fungus I finished, and then the fungus devoured them. My comrades stared at me. Then their eyes wandered to the infested expanse around us. Chikara broke the silence. "Search the space marines," she ordered the Janissaries. "Gather their grenades."
"What is your intent, Fire Warrior?"
Mutek demanded. "We will complete our enemy's mission." She indicated the monolithic puffball. "Sometimes the enemy of your enemy is the greater enemy."
"You will do no such thing!" Muthet was appalled. "We must ascertain what the Imperials discovered here."
He looked to Xanthi for support, but the young Dada Teach avoided his gaze.
"Autaku! I am sorry, Fehervari,"
his assistant muttered unhappily.
"But whatever the Imperials found here, it did them no good."
"I will search this one," I said, heading for the nearest space marine. "I trust you know what a grenade looks like, Waterkin," Chikara mocked gently. Then she was gone, heading for the upper tiers.
"Cowards!" Mutek called after us. "You are all betraying the greater good!"
"No, we are serving the greater good," I thought fiercely, "even if some of us have come to doubt it." Biting down my disgust, I dragged the corpse away from my chosen warrior, intent on searching his utility belt. That was when I noticed the hum. It was faint, but its source was unmistakable. This space marine's armor was still powered. Unsettled, I peered up at his archaic helmet. A flat visor covered on the right side of his face, but the left was a tangle of bionics clustered around a jutting optical sensor. Upon close, he seemed more machine than man. "Iron Hand," Chikara had called this one.
"Fehervari, wait!"
The voice was Xanthi's, its urgency irresistible. I glanced around and saw Mutek standing beside the puffball, a laser scalpel in one hand and a sample container in the other. "Wait!" I echoed, but the scalpel was already descending towards the molten surface.
"Don't!"
The puffball exploded like a bomb. And that's precisely what it is, I recalled. A spore bomb. Dormant, but not dead. There was no fire or fragmentation in that blast, but the concussion threw Mutek across the tiers, slamming him against the controls with bone-breaking force. I saw his body rebound a heartbeat before everything was smothered in swirling grey smoke. Clutching my mask tightly, I screwed my eyes shut and crouched, sheltering beneath the iron hand. The scattered Janissaries cursed as the spore cloud rolled over them, but the curses turned to choked screams as their lungs drowned in filth. I heard them stumbling about as they fought to escape the torment. Someone opened fire blindly, his pulse rounds sizzling as they ripped through the congealed air. Someone else screamed his last as a wild run struck him. That was a mercy, the only kind remaining to this man. I risked a glance as one of them fell to his knees alongside me. The toxic whiteout reduced him to a vague, falling silhouette, but I could see his entire body heaving violently, as if in the grip of some bone-deep tremor. Not bone-deep. This quake ran much deeper than that. I heard his flesh seething as its muscles contorted into new shapes, stretching his skin taut in the struggle to contain the chaos beneath. Suddenly he screamed, spewing blood and spores as his back arched inwards at an impossible angle. The spine broke, then snapped back into a sleek predatory curve. Vicious spikes erupted along its length, racing to catch up with his rapidly elongating cranium. His arm shot out in a welter of shredded fingers, propelled by the bone scythe surging from his wrists. He tried to scream again, and his tongue burst free, thickened and barbed, like a stinger-tipped snake. It looks like there is a whim tree growing inside him, I thought wildly. Any moment now, that newborn hybrid will turn and see me.
Fehervari, where are you?
Xanthi called as he came stumbling through the mist, his faithful drone hovering beside him. He saw me and raised a hand in relief.
Asharel, did you see
The hybrid leapt. Propelled by powerful double-jointed legs, it streaked through the air and was upon the Aotaku before he saw it coming. The bone scythe slashed down, impaling him through the shoulder blades and pinning him to the ground. His shriek was cut off as the beast's tongue shot out like a spring-loaded blade and punched through his filtrator mask. His legs kicked about spastically as it wormed its way down his throat, stinging and seeding him with spores. The abandoned data drone twittered in confusion, and a scythe failed out and sent it spinning my way. I covered my hand as the saucer smashed into the iron hand and toppled beside me with a forlorn squawk. The smoke had thinned out, the spores settling over the chamber like softly luminescent dust. By their pallid light, I saw that none of the Januaries had escaped the change. Some were still going through the final trauma, but 5 were racing towards a solitary figure on the topmost tier. Jikara was kneeling, tracking the approaching hybrids with her pulse rifle. She fired, but her chosen mark darted aside with shocking speed. I imagined her cursing then, angry but not afraid, never afraid. She fired again, then once more in quick succession, the first shot striking her target into the path of the second. The round struck the hybrid mid-leap, throwing it to the ground in a writhing heap. Before it could right itself, a third shot sheared through its skull. A kill, but it had cost her precious time. With a chittering yawl, one of the creatures leaped into Jikara's tier, but she ignored it, intent about a more distant mark. Before I could shout a warning, her gun drone swooped from the shadows and lanced her aggressor with his twin-linked guns, almost tearing it in two. Whirling around, the saucer sped towards another hybrid, spitting fire, but the beast danced about in ragged avian bursts, bounding between the floor and the walls as it charged. At the last moment it rolled low and sprang up beneath the saucer, latching onto its rim. The drone spun about, firing furiously as it tried to dislodge its attacker, but the beast was too strong. I imagined the machine's primitive logic core assessing probabilities and weighing up options. It found its answer within seconds and self-destructed, incinerating the hybrid from waist up. I had no more time to spare for Jikara's battle. Done with its prey, Xanthi's attacker sat up on its haunches, sniffing the air while its victim writhed beneath it in the throes of change. I looked around, hoping for a fallen firearm, cursing myself for refusing to carry one, desperate for a clean death.
Power!
The voice sounded like the whiz of a dying machine, a machine that spoke Imperial Gothic. I looked up and saw the impossible. The iron hand had inclined its head towards me, its optic glowing a dull red, like a doomed sun. Beneath that merciless blaze, water turned to fire, and I became a creature of instinct. Grabbing Xanthi's battered drone, I hauled, staggering under the weight, as I raised it up to the giant like an offering to some primal god. The burden was as much philosophical as physical, yet my path seemed clear. The galaxy was tainted, and the taint had to be cleansed. The metal threaded and coiled from the warrior's helmet, swaying about like a blind snake. Then it struck, its sharpened tip drilling through the drone's casing with a whine of ruptured metal. A moment later the snake became a lich, burying itself inside the broken machine's innards and sucking it dry of power. Power to reignite its master's hatred, honest hatred. I heard Xanti's silent rise behind me, but my world had narrowed to the awakening iron hand. I knew my sanity had gone, unraveled by O'Shea Shin's lies and Fidra's truths. All that remained was horror and the will to face it, for the greater good. The rest was a blur. The hybrid howled behind me, and its keen answered from all sides. I spun round as it left, its virulent tongue extended towards me. The Space Marine's fist met the beast in mid-air like a turbo tram, punching clean through its ribcage. He cast the corpse aside as the others fell upon him in a chittering, screeching mob. There were 4 in all, fully transformed and almost mindless in their need to rend and fear and tear and infect. The first came head-on and died in a heartbeat, its skull pulverized by a pneumatic punch to the face. His armor grinding like rusted cogs, the warrior swung at the waist and grabbed another by the throat, squeezing until bone and cartilage collapsed into paste. In the same instant, he rammed his manipulator claw between the jaws of a third. Its head convulsed violently as the claw became a whirling rotary blade inside its mouth. He yanked the tool free in a storm of shattered bones as the final hybrid vaulted into his back, scythes poised to back down. Before it could strike, a bolt of energy punched through its skull, throwing it from its perch. I glanced up and saw Jikara kneeling a few tiers above us, her rifle leveled. Cleansed, I thought. Every one of them. The voice made my name sound like something dredged up from a polluted ocean. I turned as Xanti hauled himself up, using his malformed scales like crutches. His movements were clumsy, crippled by the capricious mutation of his muscles, as if the fungus was baffled by Tau physiology. His face had stretched into a death mask, the lower jaw almost touching his belly. But his eyes were unchanged, staring at me with agonized recognition. Pleading. Xanti's barbed tongue surged towards me. The Space Marine shoved me aside, but the stinger lashed my shoulder as I fell. A temporal numbness seized my arm before I even hit the ground. Dimly I saw Jikara vault from the tier above. She raised her rifle to her shoulder and advanced on the abomination, firing as she came. She didn't stop until it was a charred ruin. Then she turned her wrath on Mutek's broken, spore-saturated body. The cartographer never steered beneath the barrage. Perhaps he was already dead, but I doubt Jikara cared. The last thing I saw before consciousness slipped away was the dimming red light in the Iron Hand's optic. Power, he whispered, and then we both faded to black. You were fortunate, Jikara said when I awoke. The numbness in my arm had faded, leaving behind a dull ache. Its sting did not carry the infection. Then by unspoken consent, we fed the Iron Hand, gathering the Janissary's weapons and power packs and offering them up to his ravenous mechandendrite. The ritual was without sense, for the enemy of our enemy was destroyed, leaving only the enemy. Yet we never hesitated. We were both creatures of instinct now, bound by an imperative stronger than the Tauva. How long have you waited? I asked the giant when we were done. The Imperial Gothic came easily to my tongue. It always had. How long? His voice was slurred and electronic, the syntax broken. Very long. How did you survive? He turned his optic on me, weighing me up like an iron god. Audibly, the visor covering the right side of his face slid aside. In place of flesh and bone, I saw a formless grey tangle riddled with electronics and corroded rivets. The flesh betrays, he said, though he had no lips. But the machine is faithful. I saw his tone then. His body had succumbed to his wounds, but his depleted augmetics had endured, cradling his consciousness as life slipped away. Half corpse, half machine. He had stood frozen in this chamber for untold decades, burning with impotent rage as his dead flesh was consumed. Denied sleep for the deeper oblivion of death, he had watched as corruption blossomed within and without. I saw him descending into madness, then clawing his way back in the hope of redemption, then falling again. How often had that cycle repeated? And where did it stand now? Your mission is complete, I said carefully, indicating the tattered spore bomb. We destroyed that taint.
You did not. This was nothing, just another tendril of the corruption. I watched it grow, then grow stale, over the long.
He fluttered as his splintered mind strove for coherence.
The root survives.
He stepped towards the center of the chamber, moving with surprising grace. We followed and saw the pit for the first time, a dark slash in the ground where the manga fungus had blossomed. On closer inspection I saw it wasn't a pit at all, but a steeply inclined tunnel, its walls resinous with fungus like the aperture of a titanic blood vessel or a stalk. The spore bomb grew from here, I realized, and our corruption is still down there, rooted deep in the ground.
The mission is incomplete.
Like the Iron Hand's mission, my story is incomplete, but that is of no consequence. My purpose is not to entertain you, but to warn you. Chikara will carry this log out of the coil and ensure that it is heard and heeded. This undying tomb must be quarantined, lest we fail to destroy its voracious legacy. Yes, I have chosen to accompany the Iron Hand on his final duty. I am no warrior, but I can carry grenades and will bear many into the unclean bowels of this place. Chikara argued against it, of course telling me it was her duty to make the final descent. You should bear the word, and I the fire, she said. But it could not be. You see, I cannot return. Chikara was wrong. Xanti's sting did carry the contagion. Though his touch was fleeting, I can feel the taint stirring in my blood like the promise of lies. I don't know how long I have, but I will not hide in the darkness until the blight takes me. Besides, my corruption is more than blood deep, for I have fallen from the Tauva. I am no longer a creature of water or fire, nor indeed of sanity, but I can still serve. I shall descend into the pit alongside my enemy and purge the unclean, for the greater good.
End recording.